Hello. Welcome to the Empowered Artist Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Apple, a multi-hyphenate actor, educator, acting coach, writer, dog mom, and founder of this vibrant community that champions artists as they carve out their own unique paths in this wild industry. Whether you're just starting out, in the thick of it, or seeking a bit of artistic fuel to expand your toolbox, you're in the right place. In this space, we'll have honest conversations, share actionable strategies, tips, and resources, and delve into the messy yet beautiful journey of living a sustainable, creative life. We unmask the reality of life as an artist, from navigating career highs and lows to nurturing your full human well-being. I chat with women and non-binary guests who share their personal stories, helpful learnings, and hearts to help you unlock your artistic potential, expand your knowledge, and show up fully and fearlessly in your artistry and daily life. Before we dive into this week's conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. If today's chat resonates with you, please leave us a review. It helps us reach even more incredible artists just like you. And hey, feel free to spread the love. Share this podcast with a friend or post it on your socials, making sure to tag at Empowered Artist Collective and at @JenniferApple_ so we can chat with you there. All right, grab a cup of something cozy, settle in, and let's get to it. How do you embrace your full identity and use social media as a tool for connection? In this episode, I talk to Alexi Melvin, who opens up about her journey as a queer artist, from building an online presence in the queer space to advocating for authentic representation in theater and beyond. As a producer, Alexi sheds light on the Broadway landscape, the need for more inclusive and innovative storytelling, and how advocating for oneself and others can change the industry from the inside out. She offers insight on showing up as your whole self, staying open to new creative paths, and using humor as a bridge for connection and understanding. Together, we reflect on the generational shifts in embracing queerness, the importance of finding spaces where you feel truly seen, and how relationships, whether online or in person, built with kindness and curiosity, can shape opportunities in the industry. Plus, we talk about the responsibility of lifting up others and the power of showing up, messy, imperfect, and fully yourself. Enjoy. Alexi Melvin, hi.
Hi, how's it going?
It's happening. It's really happening. How's
Things
it going?
are happening.
Yeah, it's going for you too, I'm imagining.
Yes, the things are happening. I'm not sure how I feel about them. Mostly not great, but we are where we are.
We say both of us with a smile. If anybody's tuning into a YouTube, the great was smiled through. For anybody who does not know you, who are you today?
Today, I'm feeling very much like the Renaissance person that I have always been. But I am an artist, a storyteller, a producer, an actor, occasional writer, and as of late, definitely a social media creator in the queer space.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say as of late. I mean, I guess if we're putting time on it, what do you mean by late for you in this? Because time means nothing.
Since the pandemic, I would say.
Yeah. That's like, I don't mean to age us or you or it, but like that's over 5 years.
I know, which seems crazy, but yeah,
Or
it's
like,
definitely.
yeah, like a 5th year anniversary moment. So you've been doing it for like later than late.
It's been an era for sure.
Love that for you. I'm really excited for you to be in this space. We don't need to get into our personal history necessarily.
Or why not? I mean, if you want to,
or
we have time.
I feel like the listeners might be intrigued.
Sure.
We could go there, but I also, I think for the latter part of this journey of yourself, I feel like the thing that's been really exciting to watch and see is the way you have shown up on social media. I think arguably that's something that many folks maybe know you more from, just because the way in which you engage. And so I'm curious, what had you begin to explore in that way and then continue sharing in that way, and then I guess even more specifically now leaning into sharing in that way?
Yeah, I think a lot of us over the pandemic were feeling very powerless in terms of how are we going to create something? There's nothing going on. There's no theater. There's no film. There's no work. And for myself, I had left New York. I had been in the Bay Area. I was in Arizona for a bit. I was kind of like living a ranch life, like with horses and things like that, which is lovely. But I was feeling very, like I said, kind of powerless, and my creative muscles had not been worked in a very long time. And um, somebody mentioned TikTok, and I was like, okay, that's like a thing for kids, right? Like I had no idea. Like I just was seeing in my mind's eye, like, young boys skateboarding and stuff. I'm
Oh,
like,
okay. That's a very different
that's TikTok?
visual. Yeah.
Yeah, no, initially, like it was like the kids these days were on
Yeah.
TikTok. Um,
But also just for you, just from my understanding, kids these days, that's boys who skateboard?
I guess that's what I had seen from TikTok. It was like these
Understood.
videos of kids doing things that were, yeah, it was giving very like jackass.
Got it.
Um,
I imagine
my
your
friend,
algorithm has changed since then.
a little bit,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, my friend was like, "No, you have no idea. There's literally like a lesbian TikTok." And
Mhm.
I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" I had no concept of the algorithm or what that even meant. But I was like, "Okay, well, show me." So she pulled it up, and I was like, "Oh, interesting. Okay,
Mhm.
you weren't kidding. This is lesbian TikTok."
Mhm.
And at that point, it was kind of, at least what I was seeing was more just kind of the thirst traps,
Yeah.
which were, they did prove to be beneficial for a certain audience of women that were perhaps, realizing some things. And we love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It was great. But I was like, okay, well, how could I sort of get into this space? Um, and it certainly wasn't immediate that I found my niche. I started out kind of, I guess my first video was like a reaction video,
Mhm.
which I still do those for sure. But it was just kind of like a reaction of like a queer woman going, "What is lesbian TikTok? Oh
Mhm.
my." And it kind of it got a good amount of views. And then I kind of tried to see what the whole thirst trap of it all looked like. And I was like, absolutely not. This is not a thing
Yeah.
for me. Never again.
Did you take those
And
videos down, or if I go scroll back further, I could find
oh, I'm
them?
sure you could find a couple.
Cool, cool.
Um,
Noted.
Now I'm gonna go back and
Delete them.
do a
Understood.
sweep. Yeah, for sure. Uh, and then I think it just kind of evolved to, I might have done a video of me watching something with Kate Blanchett in it or something like that, and then it kind of exploded where everybody was like, A, relatable,
Mhm.
and B, you kind of look like a gay version of Kate Blanchett. And I was like,
Biggest compliment
okay,
of your life,
of my
truly.
life,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I sort of ran with both of those things, and it has sort of become what it is. Um, but it's been, it took me a while. I mean, I know there's some creators that, make one viral video and they have millions of followers. That was not my experience. Like it
Mhm.
has taken a few years to get to a certain point. And now I'm in New York, and I can kind of blend my theater family with what I'm doing, especially the queer theater kids, and
Mhm.
it's kind of just come together in that way.
Thank you for sharing the origin of that. I think, so many people see things and they forget that, like, it took a moment to do the thing or create the thing or to get to the
Mhm.
the place of where we go. Um, and so just to go into the nuts and bolts of it for a hot second, and then we can go into the creative part. When you are creating and you are actually deciding to do a TikTok, do you make them in real time? Do you backlog them? Do you have a strategy around the way in which you create? Do you use particular templates, or it's like if you see it, then it inspires you? Like, what is your method to your madness?
It's a good question. I do know a lot of people that tend to backlog a
Mhm.
lot, or they'll kind of just like write down ideas and they'll have this whole like note section of ideas. I typically don't. If I see something to react to or whatever, I'll typically do it in that moment.
Wow.
Or if I have an idea, I'll do it fairly soon after I have the idea. Um, like improv and sketch comedy is like one of my favorite things. So I
Mhm.
typically like want to get out of my system right then and there and kind of just react in the moment. So that's, but sometimes I won't have time and I'll kind of like see something and save it in my drafts, and then I'll get to it when I get to it. But typically, yeah, it's like sooner than later for me.
Have you found that people now know you from your content rather than potentially like some of the work that you are doing in the creative space? I mean, not that this isn't creative, but just like in the actual doing of it.
Yes, definitely. Which is so funny for me, where I'll be sort of at, actually, I was at the opening for The Tempest in London, which I am one of the producers for.
Yes,
And
you
at the
are.
after party, two, this like gorgeous lesbian couple came up to me, were like, I watched you on TikTok. I was like, no, you don't. In London. I'm like, serious?
Yes.
It's like, so yes, that is definitely what I'm more so recognized for, which I don't hate.
I would imagine then, and please correct me if I'm wrong, has it been in some ways like a tool that has connected you to other folks that maybe you might not have otherwise been connected to? And if so, in what way?
For sure. I think even, in terms of projects that are presented to me, even if it's not like this person knew this producer that I worked with, it's more so like, oh, they get wind of the fact that I am involved in
Mhm.
theater through my content and approach me from there.
Mhm.
So it's definitely another channel from which I can sort of connect, which, that part I didn't expect.
Yeah.
And especially if it's a queer project, I've gotten a lot of people coming to me with, a play you know, um, that's queer, and it's lovely. And that's
Yeah.
always sort of the material that I prioritize anyway.
I love it. I think what you're getting at here, or what I guess I'm trying to get us towards, is, so much about this industry is relationships and who or who knows you. And I don't mean that in like a skeevy way. I mean that in like truly like who can vouch for you and either like your talent or the things that you've done, or more importantly, just like how you are as a human being in a room and as a person, and whether or not
Mhm.
people want to spend their time with you. And I would imagine from, building this networking moment in the like ethernet, like,
Mhm.
you know, I- the translation of that for me also has been something that's like so interesting to watch and see with a lot of my friends who have also been, spending a lot of their energy creating content on social media, in addition to them actually doing the craft and the way in which they're doing so in person.
Mhm.
um, and how in many respects it actually is just another way of doing this kind of networking without having to like be in those physical rooms.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't have the answers for it, especially for folks like myself who are maybe a little bit more resistant to the front facing camera creating stuff, like offering that for folks who maybe are more interested in that maybe than the in person, just like the balance of it and how
Mhm.
both are necessary and also valuable, and also expanding of one's network of people who you can connect with.
Yes. Well, I think both things are important. And let's face it, some people are just more skilled at, sliding into DMs, let's say, and
Yeah.
not in the like creepy way, but in the like, hey, I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Let's collaborate, and some people are a little more, it's tough to approach somebody in a room,
For
right? Like
sure.
that's really a skill you have to build up.
Yeah.
And if you're not quite there yet, it's perhaps easier to be like, to have something written out. Um, and to connect on the creative space within social media. Maybe you create similar content, maybe, whatever it may be. Um, but yeah, it's funny, you talk about networking. I always kind of associated like a negative connotation with that
Yeah.
word, because it seems like, oh, what can I get from you?
Correct. Like
Um,
transactional in that way.
yeah, it does sound very that. But I kind of see it now as like, maybe don't be a terrible human in rooms where you might be surrounded by people you admire,
Yeah.
people you might want to work with in the future, because you really never know.
Yeah.
For me, like I came to New York when I was very young, and I made some connections within the theater space, but was never built to be a theater performer, so I didn't really know how that was going to manifest or what that was going to look like. But like 15 plus years down the line, I run into these people again, and
Yeah.
they're like, oh, cool, I see what you're doing now. And that's really great. And like, I remember you from this place. So let's work together. So you
Hmm.
just never know what that networking is going to look like or what the timeline is going to be
Yeah.
around it. But yeah. And again, it can happen online, it can happen offline. Both of those things, you just never know.
It reminds me of, how some people, and all these words are going to come out messy and gross, but there's like a status play to like, oh, you are at a different quote unquote level in this field, and therefore you hold more power or, again, status than I do, and therefore I don't need you, or you don't need me energy that I do think that some folks have, or then maybe begin to have once they continue progressing in their career. And it's just like, you actually don't know who people will become, and not from like an icky place of just like, how will I use you, in no way, shape, or form, but like, you don't know who people will become and the way in which they will like create work, and who they want to collaborate with, and the rooms that they will find themselves in, and then the way in which we as individuals can then come back into people's lives and in different seasons. And if they're different and you're different, or if the energies have changed, like, these things are all things that we don't know. And it's just, the more I am in this industry, the more I realize, like, continue working on your talent and your craft and like the things that you care about 1,000%. Continue investing your time, energy, and resources into that. And more importantly, like, maybe invest more into like yourself as a human being, and just like truly the gratitude and the kindness and the grace that we can offer to people will be the thing that people will remember, like in their bodies, of like, oh yeah, you left me feeling this way when you left this room, versus, oh yeah, I remember you said this thing. Like, like, how did you make somebody feel? I wish we all focused a little more on that.
Yes, absolutely. I felt so awkward when I first came to New York. I had no real sense of who I was yet. And it really was the people that I remember really holding space for me, and not placing any judgment on sort of the fact that I was very unclear on how my passions and my interests were going to manifest in this space of theater. And things have very much evolved, and I didn't really know that it would wind up in the producer space. But like, it seemed to make sense to those people, now that I'm circling back, and they're like, oh yeah, here you are, and like, they want to work with the version of me that I've become, because they were present for that version of myself back then,
Yeah. And then they get to be a part of seeing how it can continue. Like, they get to be part of that journey as it moves through, which also, if I think about the people in my life that I've, known for a while, to in any way, shape, or form be on that journey with them, and be able to open doors or help them or like support them in the ways that I can. There is something gratifying for oneself around giving in that way, that goes back. That's like the positive side to the gross, like icky networking of the transaction. It's like, not, yes, in theory you're getting something back, but actually, like, by you giving to somebody, how does that also make you feel, with the gratitude that you can show up with. Also, just what I know of you, it actually is surprising to me that you wouldn't have thought you'd be a producer, because you are a people person, even if you are awkward, which is part of your charm, but I feel like producing is more than anything just like, how do you talk to people, and how do you communicate with them in a way that they want to be a part of the thing that you're talking about.
I mean, it is funny that I am a people person, because you wouldn't, I guess, immediately think that of me. Though I do know how to engage people, like, I guess that's kind of clear from my content, and in that kind of strategic way, that weird way. But it's, I guess, going back to reimagining the word networking, it's really just about sort of seeing the spark in somebody, and how is that going to align with each other. It's just like, it's seeing the person and seeing the beauty in what they want to create. And I don't know, I've never been like, I've never taken business courses. I've never, it's really just seeing the humanity in people, especially in the arts, and I mean, I don't know, that's how I always approach it.
Hi, actor friends, talking to you. If finding the perfect monologue has you feeling stuck, I've got just the thing. I've put together a free monologue selection toolkit just for you. It's packed with resources, free and paid options, plus tips for choosing, editing, and customizing pieces to showcase you. Head over to jenniferapple.net/freebie and stop avoiding the auditions that ask for a monologue or waiting for the perfect piece to simply fall into your lap. Dive into this free toolkit that I set up just for you that'll set you up to feel agency over your process and artistry. That's jenniferapple.net/freebie and get started on finding your next go-to monologue. Well, how do you then decide what projects or people you want to work with? Obviously, you mentioned that people are approaching you for more queer related stories. But for yourself, as you are choosing to be involved, are there specific storylines that are the things that you are seeking? Is it the kind of creative team that's a part of it? Is it the vision that's behind the production? Is it what is the chicken or the egg in terms of the work that you are now pursuing?
Yeah, I think I was really fortunate to have had a very full first season as a producer this past season, because I got to see so many different energies working together and so many different projects and so many different outcomes.
Come on, name drop. Come on, do.
Okay. Well, I was on Here Lies Love was my first. The Notebook I had been involved with for a while. Kurt Deutsch is one of my mentors, so I've kind of been on that journey with him. And then there's Illinois, and I invested on The Outsiders because I'm close with LaShawns and she knows good theater. Let's see, was that it?
For your Tony season, yes, but then you obviously had some out of town things too.
Yes.
It's like, why do I know your career better than you?
I know. I'm like, what am I forgetting? Well, Sunset Boulevard, I am involved with on the investor level, and I don't fancy myself to be an investor. Like, I'm not that, but if I'm really passionate about what the project is doing, I will do what I can. But so that's what I do with Sunset Boulevard. But I think with all of those very different shows, now there's two things. I mean, I definitely want to champion shows that are highlighting diverse, communities and, predominantly the queer space, marginalized communities, and really trying to crack the code of what it's going to look like to make those successful in the ways they deserve to be, right? Like, shows like Lempicka really did, reach audiences. Like, every queer person I know appreciated it, but did it get the longevity it deserved? No. Same with Here Lies Love, right? So what is it going to look like? I don't know. So it's kind of like my life's mission to crack that code. But beyond that, I would say shows that are going to push Broadway forward. There's a lot to be said to, paying tribute to the foundations of Broadway and what that looks like, but also what's the next chapter? So like the way that Sunset Boulevard was told, for instance, like those kinds of innovation, like those kinds of innovative ideas from directors like Jamie Lloyd, or, those things I'm very interested in.
Is it more the project or the people also? I guess it's like, okay, cool. This is a really cool project, but like these producing team, I don't love their ethos, or like, does that matter? Or is it?
It does matter. It does matter. And like I said, I got definitely different vibes from the different shows I was in with. None of them were bad. Like I was pretty fortunate where I had a good experience for myself, but like I've heard things and I've seen, where I would look at it and be like, it didn't have to be that way. So I definitely know the vibe that I'm looking for. And it's, it doesn't have to be so structured as it has been, like where, co-producers can only do this and lead producers do this. And, we can't have space for everybody in the room. Like, that's not what I'm interested in.
What are you interested in then? If you could like reinvent the way that structures work, I guess also talking from like how structures currently are, if like we can, like, let's talk about that for a second. Like, this is how it tends to look. This is what I wish it were. And this is how I'm trying to make that happen.
Sure. I mean, historically, it's been like, they're the GPs, the lead producers, and they, they're from they're with the project from jump, and they have a say over everything. They hire the director, they hire the everybody involved, the creatives, and then they have the co-producers that they bring on, who then bring on more investors, and it's kind of like, it goes from there. But most of the time, the co-producers don't get to be in those rooms that they want to be in.
Yeah.
I've met co-producers that don't necessarily want to be in the artistic side of things, which is fine. They kind of just want to be, the financial person, and then they kind of walk away and they're like, look, I was involved in that. Cool.
Yeah.
Me, who is a storyteller and an artist, like, I want to be in those rooms. So I think productions that really like care about the individual strengths of each co-producer that they're bringing on, I really value, which Here Lies Love was one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So having it be my first show as a producer was like, I did not get like the norm and then I kind of trickled down and I was like, oh, that this is not
how it usually is,
how it has been.
Yeah.
So I got to sort of like, I was very inspired by that. And I hope that it can kind of grow into that.
In these spaces that you're in now, let's say they aren't functioning in the Here Lies Love model, and it really is more, standard, stereotypical, like the co-producers aren't necessarily in the rooms. Is it something that you can like raise a hand and be like, hey, can we readjust the structure? Or is it more just like for yourself, you can be like, hi, I would like to be in these rooms, even though this isn't how this is working?
I mean, I think now that I'm kind of pivoting to, I would like to be the lead on things and not so much in the co-producer space. I would like to sort of be an example for that, and sort of encourage people to advocate for themselves in that way.
Yeah. Because what I'm hearing is, obviously change takes time, and it also requires individuals who are willing to take the time to implement the change. And also perhaps either the innovation, the idea, or like an example of how it can be successful. And, what I'm hearing also, and this reminds me of kind of what Katie Spellman, who from Notebook, who we had on the podcast, was talking about when it came to, her career as a choreographer, like pulling people up who are, like who haven't had that opportunity yet. Like, it is kind of our responsibility. And she certainly talked about it from a woman's perspective of like, we need to continue bringing women up in the industry. And I guess what I'm hearing from this is just like, if somebody didn't give you that opportunity in, say, Here Lies Love, to even see what was possible for creating a space that allowed other folks to be in the room that maybe otherwise wouldn't be, you wouldn't even know that in theory was a thing that could work well. And to then be a part of something that shows you that it's possible, and then wants to create that for yourself, there is like a sense of responsibility in some way to sharing and showing other producers who are just starting out what might be possible, and then the change can continue.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even beyond the producer of it all, I think it should be, I think every artist and storyteller should be able to advocate for themselves in creative spaces. I've heard horror stories from actors that, get their ideas shut down, or, they're treated in a way because they're a woman, their ideas aren't as embraced as, a male in the exact same position, are. So it's like, we all just really need to sort of speak up and change that structure. Because if we don't have the community, like, what do we have?
Yeah.
And, we all kind of have to lead by example, which is a hard thing. And like you've said, it takes time to create that change, but if we don't start now, when,
Well, how do you think that we can better support one another, specifically like women supporting women, or queer folks supporting queer folks? Like, how do we do that better?
Speak up. I mean, I've seen a lot of silence these days, especially these days, I know a lot of people sort of are in the headspace of like, if I say something, it'll be wrong and I'll be judged for it. Or, it's safer this way. It's safer not to say anything. But I disagree. I think especially in rooms, if you're in the room and you see something that has happened to you or that you don't want to happen to anybody in the community, like, speak up. just advocate for the people in your community and who aren't in your community.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't, for instance, if you don't know something about a particular marginalized community that you're not a part of,
Mm-hmm.
ask questions so that you can better advocate for them as well.
Yeah.
It's, there's nothing bad that can come from asking questions. And then speaking from what I've heard you talk about the silence that's happening right now, right?
It goes back to what we were talking about in the way beginning of like being a good person. Like,
Yeah.
And I really do believe that in order for change to happen, we will all make mistakes. And I think there's a real fear around being messy and a real fear around making those mistakes because it potentially costs you or somebody else something. And then what happens, right? And there's a fear around hurt, which is very real.
Mm-hmm.
There's the intent versus impact of it all. Like, I intended to do this and this is what happened. And then what
Right.
do you do when something happens, right? And so there's a fear around not wanting to even get into that as part of, something that could play out because we don't necessarily know how to navigate it once the damage is done. But we
Mm-hmm.
don't grow unless we try, and we don't grow unless we are messy. And
Yes.
sometimes like actually asking things when you're like, I don't know how this works, or I feel like I've heard these things and please, I would love to understand this better. Or actually, I'm unsure if this is something that actually is really helpful. Is there a way for me to
Mm-hmm.
without costing somebody emotional stress, or if they don't have the
Yeah.
bandwidth for it, barring that, showing up with an open heart and curiosity doesn't cost you anything. Arguably, that is the gateway that will allow people to come towards you and have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, even, within the Sapphic community,
Mm-hmm.
I do get sort of like, cishet men
Yeah.
that are commenting. And some of them, like, I don't mind for a very specific reason, which is that they genuinely ask questions
Mm-hmm.
or, comment on how this is changing their perspective,
Mm.
and like, I don't mind that at all. Like,
Yeah.
yes, my content is for the Sapphic community, but if somebody's benefiting from it, if somebody is, I made a video about like when you're ready to date a woman and when you're not ready to date a woman and what that looks like. And like genuinely, like these cishet dudes are like, wow, that's really helpful. And I'm gonna like
Mm.
send this to my other guy friend. And I'm
Mm.
like, oh, okay, this wasn't actually for you.
Yeah.
However, if this is gonna help you sort of like champion the woman that you're with and like
Mm-hmm.
empower her and make her feel seen and her, like, fantastic. Because like
Yeah.
as much as I would love everybody to be gay, they're not. So fantastic. But yeah, that's just going back to what you were saying. Like, I don't mind if they ask questions.
Have you been using the same monologue for years? Are you gearing up to apply for BA, BFA, or MFA programs and need pieces for that process? Or maybe you just have no idea where to even start with monologue hunting? I get it, and that's why I offer monologue sourcing. This is a unique process where I find monologues chosen specifically for you. So many artists pick pieces based on external labels like type or for roles rather than finding material that represents who they truly are. So here's how it works. We'll meet virtually and you'll share all about who you are, your passions, values, beliefs, and everything in between. Don't worry, I will help guide you through this process. Then I'll get to work finding monologues that fit you like a glove. With years of experience sourcing pieces for hundreds of artists, I've seen the difference it makes to have a monologue that genuinely feels like you. So, if you want to feel empowered about the monologues you bring into rooms and use for auditions, I would love to help you find them. And because you're a listener of the Empowered Artist Collective podcast, I'm offering an exclusive rate. Head to empoweredartistcollective.com/podcast promo to register and claim the special offer. That's empoweredartistcollective.com/podcast promo. I cannot wait to help you find monologues you absolutely adore. Going back to social media for a sec, then in this,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know why I'm so fascinated by it, but I think it's just because you've figured out a niche for people who are newer to it or want to be more engaged in their social media presence. What would be some of
Mhm.
your like starter kit suggestions for folks who are wanting to get into it?
First of all, I would say just scroll, see what
Spend
kind of
more
filters.
hours of your time.
Spend more hours, more screen time.
Yeah.
Don't read or anything. Just sit in bed
Yeah.
scrolling.
Exactly.
No, I would say no, but within the sort of community that you are drawn to or that you consider yourself to be a part of, see what pings for you, see what makes you laugh, see what you sort of resonate with. Um, but also just like be very unapologetic.
Mm,
um, because the experience and the versions of myself that I've been throughout my years, all it all comes out, it all comes through. It's all very, self-deprecating in a way. Like I'm a simp. I'm, a hype girl for women. Like I've always been those things. Um, and I think like growing up, sometimes there was a little bit of shame around
yeah.
aspects of that. Um, but like the moment I started doing it and just like really leaning in, people were like, oh my gosh, same. I feel seen.
Hmm.
So the ability to make those people feel seen and also laugh, especially in this current climate, is really rewarding. So, the things that the things that make you laugh about yourself, right? The things that you thought were other about yourself growing up that now you might be like leaning more into or embracing more, like that,
Yeah.
like for example, if you I know I've gone through many versions of like finding my style or like dressing for my body, and like
Mm,
especially since I'm kind of very much on the she they spectrum,
hmm.
um things like that, right? Like if you're in the current exploration of self, like share that with people if you feel
Yeah.
safe to.
Yeah. I mean, I hate this word. It's like the authenticity of it all. I wish we had another word that wasn't fully like commandeered and used for marketing tools. But there is, but what we really boil down to when we actually mean the word is like, and I used to feel this way. And this is like an ADD tangent, but I used to feel this way when back in the day when my Thrival job was headshot photography. Did you know that I
Mm.
used to do that? I don't know if you knew
I
that.
don't know that I did. No.
Yeah. That was like a Thrival job for a hot second, and I hated editing. But I
Mm.
still love and would do. I mean, somebody asked me recently, they're like, would you go back to this? And it's like 1,000% if somebody else was the editor. But the reason I loved it so much was I really did like fall in love with every single client of mine, because the camera didn't lie. And I got to like see this person and just like all of their organic natural elements of every single human emotion, while I was like seeing them through this lens, and I was trying to capture the essence of them. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, social media for a lot of the things is like a lie, and it's a really horrible, horrifying place. And the good parts of it is when somebody is showing up authentically and themselves, you can tell, you can like really, really, really tell, like, oh yeah, this is energetically, I'm getting something truthful from this person, and the way in which they're storytelling and the way in which they're sharing of themselves and showing up
Mm-hmm.
vulnerably. Even if it's comedically, there's still an element of vulnerability in that. So,
Oh
I
yeah.
think arguably you're tapping on the fact that like you've tapped into your own sense of authenticity and who you are, and showing up from wherever you are, whether that's messy or in flux or not, people will
Mm-hmm.
relate to that. And arguably we deserve to see more of each other in process, I think.
Yes, yeah, that's what I mean. And also kind of going back to your question of how do we support one another? Like that's a way to do that,
Yeah.
you know? Like
Yeah.
if we're going to be scrolling on social media, why not sort of share all the messy parts of yourself so that people can be like, okay, I'm not alone.
Mhm. Yeah. It just requires a lot of bravery, frankly, in the climate that we live in, I think.
Yeah,
And so how do you find that
exactly.
bravery within yourself to just like ignore people who have a lot of feelings, who maybe potentially come at you and say things that are not kind?
Hmm. Well, I'm very quick to block
We
people,
love
first of all. And I know that some people don't really have that luxury, especially people who have followers in the millions and millions, like
Mhm.
that, Um, but the bravery of I think it helps that I think the queer community is a very supportive community
Mhm.
these days, for sure. That might not have been the case when I was younger, which I can touch on as well. But and also, the fact that it is through a comedic lens generally does help because it kind of it's a softer approach, right? Like, and I think it does. And then it's an act, it's another layer of bravery to just sort of look at the camera and say something just like dead ass,
Yeah.
which, especially these days, which I have done a few times recently. And it's like, that's when I feel scared, honestly. Like my defense mechanism is comedy. It's comedy. So
You say again through a smile.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it is, it can be very hard. And
Yeah.
like I said, recently I have felt very passionate about certain things that are going on in the world. So I just have to say it and not laugh at myself and just sort of, and I think, it does feel rewarding in a different way. Right.
Are you comfortable talking about your youth to now?
My youth.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it just now, so now I'm curious to hear the growth that you feel you've
Yeah.
navigated or like
Yeah.
how that's changed.
Sure. Well, I mean, I knew I was queer from a very young age. I was 13 when I realized it. And there were no examples,
Did
is
you
the
have a
thing.
moment that you were like, "Oh, I definitely am."
Oh, yes. And I've said this, I've said this on social media, but Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge
Okay.
was it.
That would do it.
I had sort of, my mom will tell you she knew I was queer from age 5. Like I was just enthralled with women. Watching old movies and just like I was so gay. I was so gay. But again, not having examples of what that looks like, like the movies I would watch, the shows I would see, like there was no examples. Even when it comes down to like celebrities in the spotlight, there was, I just didn't see it. But then there was kind of like the Ellen DeGeneres of it all, and Melissa Etheridge, and like it started to be a little bit more of a known thing in my orbit. And so yeah, 13 saw Moulin Rouge. And I remember looking at both of the leads in that film, who are very beautiful, right? And I really asked myself, which one of these two would I want to be romantic with in this time? And the answer was very clear.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So I remember, going back to my mom and saying, I think I like Nicole Kidman. Do you know what I mean?
When you were 13.
I was 13.
And your mom was like, "Yes, honey, we knew."
Yes. Yes. She was like, right. I was like, okay. So I just wanted to say that. She's like, okay, great. And then, there was no opportunity for me to really explore it in high school because there were no queer women.
That's a
But
lie. There were queer women. They just weren't. They weren't
they
sure
just weren't
yet.
aware. Correct.
That's really, yep. Carry on.
Correct. Absolutely. But I just sort of I never really had a coming out. It just kind of was. And, the close friends that I made along the way, it just kind of became, that's just who I was. And then, I don't know if you'll remember this, but there is a website called afterellen.com.
No.
It was, it was in the sort of like late high school, early college days of my life. And they had video blogs. So it was kind of like lesbians creating content before even TikTok was a thing. Right. And I did that when I was probably 18, 19, 20, 18, 19, maybe. And it was very cruel. It was the experience of it was nice because I think, the people behind that website, and other, other ones that I was involved with, gave me the space to, it was like a style vlog, which is so silly because I don't think I would do that these days. And I was very femme. I didn't really have a good sense of myself or where on the queer spectrum I was even, but anyway, there was this forum called the L Chat. I think it was called the L Chat. And their entire mission was just to create threads to say nasty things about lesbians in the spotlight. And they were queer themselves. So I'm just like, why are you doing this in your own community? So I think we have evolved quite a bit since then because like I said, I feel that, the queer TikTok community and the Instagram of it all, overall, very supportive, very loving, very empowering. So I have hope, you know,
Mhm.
for Gen Z and generations to come. But I like to say that we walked so they could run.
1,000%. 1,000%. I think about it. I also didn't have like I mean, I guess even for listeners, like I don't talk about my sexuality, my identity, my relationships at all on social media. It's a very
Yeah,
specific choice that I have made over time. Back in the
sure.
day, I think I would post more about like the people that I'm seeing or whatever. But I think we have so everything is out in the internet and in the world, and I want to keep just like a little bit for myself and the intimacy that I
Hmm.
can have with my relationships and cultivate that on its own. And that's my own choice for now, and I
Yeah.
reserve the right to
Yeah.
change that in the future. But I also never had like you know the coming out of it all too. Like I think the people who know me, I guess you can say that this is a version of it right now, but like the people who know me know, like I guess for me, I don't think of it as anything that needs it, right? Like who somebody decides to be intimate with, frankly, shouldn't be anybody's business other than your own, unless you want it to be somebody else's business. I have an issue, I think, in some ways about like using this identity as something that like gets me in rooms. Like it's strange for me.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want that to be like, oh, because she identifies as this, then this is why she's here. But then on the flip side, it's like this is a part of how I, who I am and how I exist in the world. And the people who know and love me know this about myself.
Mhm.
And I don't think it changes anything about how I am and how I exist. I think it's just an added layer to the way in which I view intimate relationships and who I am potentially interested in, but I don't think it should take anything away from somebody. And it kind of pains me, and by kind of I mean it does, that society is structured in a way that people feel that they have to reveal a part of themselves in a way that just is. There is certainly a way that it can be honored. But I think was it Karamo who said something about it, where he doesn't believe in coming out. I think he phrases it in a different way, that's like come in or something. He flips it so that you have
Mhm.
ownership over how you decide you want to invite people into this part of your life. Um,
Yeah.
which then gives more agency to it. It's just there's definitely a different way that I see Gen Z folks um, existing that I think I feel a little envious of, frankly, that there is an
Absolutely.
abandon and openness and maybe more on the like I invite you in rather than me coming to you of it all, where I just get to live my life the way that this is a generalization, of course, but like I get to live my life as more openly than perhaps folks who came before us. But like if this is the cadence that we're moving towards, then like yes, please.
That's what I mean. I mean, we love to see it. And I love the fact that they just, it's like a non issue. They're just
Yeah,
like, yeah, and I sleep with men and women.
correct.
Um, and I wish we had that. I wish I had that growing up.
Yeah,
I wish I felt that it just was a non-issue and that we could just have that be a piece of our identity
yeah,
and not be judged for it, not be seen differently for it. Like that was just certainly not the case
yeah.
when I was a young adult. um, but I love it. And going back to like we walked so you could run, I'm like, they're running. I love
They're
it.
running marathons too. Like they're not just like short sprint running. Like they're like running
No.
around like they're really going on full. They've signed up for full length marathons and they have water cups that they drink and throw to the side.
Yes.
They're
Exactly.
really going. People are cheering on the sidelines. Like they're really
Yeah.
on it for the long run.
No, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. And I can totally see Gen Z like looking at me and my content being like, oh, shut up.
Yeah, a
And like
thousand percent.
I get it. I totally get it. But also there is my generation and generations that came before me
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, we had to be kind of loud about it
Yeah.
and didn't have to. There are certainly people who weren't. But there was a group of us that I can recall that kind of started this Sapphic social media space. Like I said, even before TikTok was a thing, and that was like these two or three websites that I could think of that sort of did content, which was After Ellen, Autostraddle, maybe a couple others, and like we're just kind of like the elders that are like, look at them go,
Yeah.
but I'm glad that we decided to be loud
Yeah.
so that others didn't feel like they had to, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, it's hard also just again in the current climate that we're living in where things are really scary when it comes to being out and loud and proud.
Yeah,
And, I just want to name that also in this space too, that it's just like
100%.
hopefully, you know, more than ever, we all support one another because that's really what we have when
Hmm.
larger systems are potentially trying to make us feel small and shamed and apologize.
Correct.
And so again, going back to like the beginning of the conversation, like the being kind and nice and a good person and making other people feel seen and safe and held is like really the thing that we can do for each other, and certainly anybody who is like surrounding the community, and then hopefully the bubble that expands around it too.
Hmm.
And also, I just, for me, I think what's also been interesting to navigate is just, how I don't think I felt it maybe as supportively as you have. I think maybe just like where my intersections lie or where my loud intersections lie, it's a little touchier. And so, I think it's complicated for people to understand that what queerness can actually look like,
Hmm.
and that it doesn't just mean that it has to look a certain way, that you only like women, you only like men, you only like these kinds of like it's like no, like it's a spectrum, like truly anything. Also,
Truly.
I believe everyone's a little bit gay, but like, like
Same, but
we
yes,
can debate
continue.
this till the cows come home. But so like the spectrum of what it means to love and the way in which people want to express themselves, that that's a nebulous little thing that is hard to nail down, thankfully. And
Hmm.
also it can change for folks over time. Like if I think about my own, sexual orientation over the course of my life, I can probably like pinpoint certain parts of like, oh yeah, like you ignored that, or like, oh hot, fascinating, or maybe that's why that didn't feel great, or actually maybe this was something that you were really wanting and you denied that of yourself because of this circumstance. Like I can pinpoint
Hmm.
that forever. But if I look at it, it really has continued to morph and grow because I've given myself permission to lean in, and also
Right.
because the spaces that I'm choosing to be a part of allow me to lean in also.
Hmm.
And so just naming that, if something isn't feeling great and if people aren't making you feel seen, there are folks and other places that hopefully can make you feel supported even when times are hard.
Yes, absolutely. No notes. You nailed it there.
Thank
Um,
you so
yes,
much.
yes, you're welcome. No, I'm with you. I'm with you on the spectrum and the evolution of it all, and to really allow space for yourself to grow in that,
Yeah.
because I've been sort of tied to the lesbian of it all, right? But
Yeah.
like now I'm sort of trying to lift up the term sapphic,
Mm-hmm.
because it's much more encapsulates just women loving women slash non-binary humans slash
Yeah.
pretty much anybody that loves women that is not a cishet man,
Yep.
essentially. And I love that, and I love the space, and I love being a part of it.
Yeah. The last little thing that I want to touch on is this idea of manifesting. I know that you like do this a bit, and I am, as anybody who's listened for a hot second would know, my evolution with manifesting has morphed and grown, and I am a secret hoper that I could manifest better and understand it more, and the how to do it, but like what it
Hmm.
is. What is that for you, and what does it look like?
Yes, I feel like my realization over the years is that I've been manifesting my whole life without knowing what that meant or knowing the
Mm,
word manifesting. Because I remember, watching Broadway shows when I was 5 and 6 and 7, and seeing, when I got a bit older, like somebody like Alea Salonga or a Kristen Chenoweth or whatever, and just saying like, wow, I really see myself working with them
mm,
someday or being in their orbit somehow. And like, I so admire that human being, and just like having that knowingness, right? And just like, that's never left my consciousness. And, you know, fast forward 20 plus years later, I find myself working with Leia Salonga. I find myself working with Kristen Chenoweth,
mhm,
and sort of just not placing a timeline on that is really important.
mhm,
Because I think people might have an idea of manifestation of like, okay, I write it down and I envision it's going to happen in a week. Like,
mhm,
no. And I think that's really important for artists in particular as well, because you might, the idea of storytelling in general is very vast. And you never really know how that's going to turn out, because my first inkling was like, oh, I'm going to be an actress. Right. Yes. And you know what I mean? My experience of theater and how it sort of has manifested for me was not in acting. Rather, it was, on the producing side. And it did happen very quickly once I found myself in the place that I was supposed to be. But I had to find myself in the right place and the right time, in the right timeline of it. So I think it's just sort of this knowingness is how I kind of see it. Like, I don't even really use the word manifestation that often. It's just the kind of knowingness. And like sort of also knowing when you're in the flow of something, there's a very specific feeling to it. There's a momentum, and sort of recognizing that and clocking that and being like, okay, I want to stay in this space. What does that mean? And how do I keep it going? But there's also an element of letting go, right? Just like with the wanting to, be involved in musical theater, wanting to work with this specific person, whatever it is, knowing it, clocking it, and releasing it. And then kind of letting your purpose sort of guide you in the interim. And like, what's going to bring me joy in this moment, and then what comes from that. That's kind of been my experience. But yeah, it's crazy how if some of these manifestations literally took 20 plus years. Yeah. And that's okay, because I'm very happy with where I find myself.
Would you say that it's because you took actionable steps in conjunction with like letting the things happen organically to like to set those steps? Or is it really just trusting?
It's definitely a blend. Yes. You have to work. You have to take action. You have to strengthen what you're good at. You have to lean into your strengths and really build upon that and learn from people. Like, never stop learning, never stop going back to the networking of it all, never stop asking questions and, working with people who inspire you and exploring concepts that inspire you. So definitely, yes. Definitely you can never stop learning.
And on that note, for anybody who wants to follow your incredible content or to pull you onto a team that they are trying to find for a project that they're trying to do, what within your boundaries are the best ways for people to find you?
You can certainly find me on Instagram, the Alexi Melvin, and then TikTok. But yes, those two things are ways to find me. And yeah, you'll be getting some fun updates and Sapphic content, so be prepared.
Yeah, I'm always prepared. Thank you for going on this.
I know you are.
I mean, yeah, I'm here and ready. Thank you for going on this like queer, fun, hopping little journey. And I'm really grateful that you were in this space and you shared all the things that you shared the way that you shared them, which was openly and curiously and bluntly, which is my speed. So thank you.
Thank you. I try. We never got to dive into our personal history, but that'll be another episode.
People are going to be sliding into your DMs being like, look, I hear it. I feel it. What is it? And you'll be like, yep, it's that. That's it for today's episode. I hope you walk away with some fresh insights, feel inspired, and a little more empowered to take the next step on your artistic journey. Remember, whether it's a small shift or a big breakthrough, every step forward counts. You've got this, and we're here cheering you on every step of the way. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to hit subscribe so you'll never miss out on the discussions we have each week. And if something today really resonated with you, please leave us a review. It truly is one of the best ways to help other artists find our podcast and join in on the conversations. Plus, we feel the love too when you do. And don't keep all this goodness to yourself. Share this episode with your people or post about it on social media. Be sure to tag at Empowered Artist Collective and at @JenniferApple_ so we can see what's landing for you and keep the conversation going. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being a part of this incredible community. Keep creating, keep thriving, stay empowered. I'm Jennifer Apple. Until next time.